Where does pleasure come from? Well, if you take a naturalistic approach to the question, a kind of under the sun look at it, you're going to have a problem answering it because there really is no reason for us to prefer pleasure over pain, or even to call pleasure pleasure and pain pain. So this joy, delight, and enjoyment, all of these things really don't make a lot of sense if we are essentially nothing other than machines, if all that we are is chemicals and energy and matter. If you take a more reasonable view and recognize that there is something else beyond the physical, then you still have to answer the question, where does this come from? Now, those who deny God's existence or dislike God's existence, typically, many of them like to make the case, hey, God can't be good because we have pain. Or if he is good and we have pain, then he can't be all-powerful. One of those has got to give, with the assumption that human pain is somehow difficult to explain where it comes from. When the reality is, given the fact that we are all in rebellion against our Maker, we shouldn't be in the least bit surprised over the pain that we experience. Whether it's COVID, whether it's a Hurricane Ida, whether it's something in our own lives that it doesn't touch a million other people's lives, all these things are things that are, all these hardships are hardships that are due to us based on the reality that we're sinners. Every one of us wakes up every day according to the standards of justice under a death sentence. So now we got to ask, well, then why is there pleasure for anyone? Not why is there pain, why is there pleasure? Well, in some sense, it's the same reason. That is, the origin of our pleasure is the same as the origin of our pain. These things both come from the hand of God, who is sovereign, powerful over all things, who brings to pass whatsoever comes to pass. And God, in his grace, pours out his grace not only on those who have repented and turned to Christ for redemption, but even on those who are still in active, constant rebellion against him. We call this in theology common grace. It's the rain that God causes to fall on the unjust as well as the just. Pleasure is where and when we operate in terms of the way God made us. So one does not need to be born again to love one's child or to love one's mother. One does not need to be born again to rejoice when the Steelers win their football game. So these are gifts from the hand of God that he gives to all people everywhere. Now, does that mean that God is at peace with all men everywhere? No, not at all. Remember, God calls us to love our enemies. And in doing so, we reflect him. He knows that they're enemies. He has enemies. He's treated as an enemy by his enemies. But he responds with kindness and grace. The reason that death sentence that we're all under isn't executed daily on the believer is because it was executed on Jesus. For the unbeliever, it's so that that unbeliever might have time to repent and turn to Christ. And every bit of pleasure is a reflection, every gift of pleasure is a reflection of the giver, given with the expectation, or at least the obligation on the recipient to give thanks to the giver. Pleasure comes from God's right hand.